As I'm sure many of you already know, as part of the Clancy Tour, there was a special fan premiere event exhibit. This special event was an add on to the show ticket and contained a number of different, I suppose, artifacts and memorabilia from the years in which 21 Pilots have been performing and creating music and music videos. But there were also a number of Bandito letters, which were written and placed throughout this show and which now have been all assembled into one place. So in this video, I thought it would be interesting to go through and look at a number of them to see what, if anything, we can learn from them about who the Banditos are, or just any other general questions we might have about Dema. I went and read through all of these, giving them all a cursory glance. I didn't sit and study them necessarily for terribly long, but it seems to me that the first few letters, while interesting, don't reveal all that much more about the lore. What they do very well is give us an additional look at kind of who the individual banditos are and some of lends a voice to some of those kind of nameless individuals we see in the background and throughout. Now, obviously, we don't know, there's different ones named here who have written these letters, and we don't know if they correspond to specific banditos we have seen in different music videos. For instance, at the end of The Outside and Nico and the Niners, we see a pair of kids. We also see, for instance, in Navigating, Clancy and the Torchbearer are met by three different individuals who aren't named, obviously, either. So perhaps some of these letters are supposed to correspond with some of those. And as they go through, they become increasingly more high stakes, if you will, because it goes from just having general conversations between different individuals to talking about and conspiring towards rebellion. But since everyone has access to all of these letters, I found them all compiled just on a subreddit, which I can link below. But I'm sure everyone's already seen this particular Reddit thread. I'm not going to go through and read through all of them, but there are a couple which I think would be good to highlight and look at a bit further. And certainly, if I missed out on discussing some earlier letters which you think deserve a closer look because there are some interesting details or questions raised by what they're writing there, I'm happy to come back and take an additional look at these because I think they're interesting. And it's nice to have something other than just Clancy's letters. Anyway, with that being said, I'm going to take a look at and read through some of these letters because there's a couple different things, as I mentioned, that I think are significant here and worth examining further. Some things which stood out to me help tie different strands of my own theories together. Some things just leave me with more questions. So I'd certainly be curious to hear your own thoughts on any of the different things which we touch upon in this video as we go through. But first of all, I would like to look at number 11, which is written to Kinton, and is written by Jirita, I believe. From my understanding, this was written between, or from an individual inside Dema to another individual inside Dema. And it looks like Kinton is one of the guards working for the bishops, which is interesting because I'm not sure that we've really seen specific guards. Obviously, in Paladin Strait, we saw an army of the undead, but I don't think Kinton is a zombie soldier who was standing guard when the scroll came up and put a flower in his uniform. She writes, I was the girl that put the yellow flower in your front pocket as you stood guard. I think I saw a smirk. We notice you daily and take wagers on what day you'll finally crack, but you stand at your post, solid as a statue, day after day. I must admit it bothered me at first, but as I open my eyes more and more to the corruption of this system that keeps our spirits confined, I often feel a distaste for every institutional fixture that supports it. I've often viewed you as one of the fixtures, hardened and unable to feel the weightlessness of the Death Eaters. But recently, I've realized you're just like me. And this letter, simple though it is, illustrates this idea that the banditos inside the city are starting to look for potential allies among those who perhaps are fully under the sway of the bishops. But the way I imagine how Dema is kind of structured is, obviously we have the 9 bishops, or maybe 8 now, and the 9 villages which they rule, and then there's people who work for them within each of those villages. and we're not really sure what the different roles are. These letters do help us to get a better idea of what some of those roles are, but there might also be a hierarchy of control and brainwashing within that. Perhaps not, but I would imagine that someone who is standing guard, working as a soldier for the bishops, is under their influence to a greater degree than someone who's just working in the garden. So here, this gardener notices that maybe this soldier isn't quite as firmly under their sway as it might seem. And if you can get the soldiers to start to crack, then you can sort of unravel the structures that the bishops have set up and also bring over strength to your rebellion much more efficiently. So I thought that was interesting. Let's look at his reply. He writes, "Pretty name, pretty flower. I wondered if we'd ever get to speak. It's not every day that a citizen decorates me like you did, but I've certainly endured worse. I thought I would be reprimanded, but then I remembered they couldn't see it anyway." And just to clarify, that's because the girl put a yellow flower in his front pocket, and obviously the bishops can't see yellow, as we've known for a while. So just an interesting detail there. It's just a lifeless weed in my pocket to their perception. And this is interesting here. He writes, "I wonder if they can even see the vibrance of their robes. I wonder if they even remember what colors are." If we look at the different visual media that we've gotten from the music videos, we started with the Trench trilogy, we moved into Scaled and Icy, the 2 music videos there, and then the 3 videos from Clancy. And the Trench trilogy was very desaturated, at least in comparison to what came later. They can't see color, right? They can't see the vibrance of it. We know they can't see yellow, but it also seems like, not only from this, but I think we've seen some other indications before, that their idea or their view of color is muted in comparison to that of humans. The Scaled and Icy era was propaganda. It was a burst of color, almost like an overcompensation. It was unnaturally colorful. And then when you look at the Paladin Strait music video, that's even more unnaturally colorful. And there's been a theory floating around, which I haven't mentioned, I don't believe, in the past, because I'm not fully on board with it, I haven't fully subscribed to it. But this might support it, or at least it could. That the music video we see for Paladin Strait is further propaganda. That it's the bishop's version of the story. The idea being that it's a version of what they want us to think happened. They've put it out there for the citizens of Dema and the Banditos to see as just the total defeat of Clancy, the capture of Clancy. He's defeated at the end of the video, stuff like that. Which also ties into the fact that before the music video was released, and when it was hidden, and there was a hunt going on for it, and people found it, the version that they found was very desaturated, very colorless. So that's potentially significant, potentially lends weight to that theory, which again, I'm not fully convinced of, but I wouldn't at all be surprised if it were the case, and I think there are some ways in which that ties in. There's also this idea going around that we're about to see the trial of Clancy, and everything in the album Clancy are just court documents, as it were, leading up as evidence, right? Court documents as evidence leading up to this trial. There's a lot of things which indicate that that would be the case. It's very, I think it's a very valid theory. I haven't seen as much support for it as I would like, but I would not at all be surprised if that ends up being what is actually going on here. But, what do you think? I'm still a little on the fence about that, a little undecided. But the other thing, I think, again, going back to the Paladin Strait music video, that is so significant about this is he is referenced down here. His bishop gets mad at him that he's kind of daydreaming while he's on guard. So my question is, if there are armed guards throughout Dema, which report to the different bishops, then how come when the Banditos attack in Paladin Strait, they aren't sent out to fight? It's just an army of the undead. Right? I don't think there's any indication here that this person writing this letter is a seized vessel. That doesn't make any sense. So where are the armed guards? And furthermore, where are the rest of the citizens of Dema? Now, perhaps you could say they're all just locked inside, and perhaps the armed guards are being used to keep them inside. That could be the case. But you'd think if enough of these citizens are brainwashed by the bishops successfully, when they see an army attacking their home, They're going to do something to fight. I don't know. So I don't really have a clear answer to that question, but I think it's one that's worth asking because we don't see any indication of citizens or armed guards during the Paladin Strait music video. We just see an army of the undead being sent out against them. So what's going on there? All right, just three more things I wanted to touch on here in the next few letters. These are two people inside the walls, and perhaps one of them is a bandito who already tried to escape and was brought back, and is now back in the city and is trying to sow dissent from within. She writes to Pierre, "Your blackened hands is a dead giveaway that your work is done below the towers. You get bread every 7 days and never say a word. But the black hands that take the bread tell me everything I need to know about your day. You work in death. Sorry, you work in glory. I'm sure it's lonely down there, saddened by the gone as you bend and twist their gravestones. I'm sure you see their faces or remember your encounters with them. We all miss them, but you have to see them all off. I'm sure it feels wrong at times. I'd love to talk about that too." So here we see two more jobs within the city of Dema. One, a baker who's writing this letter, and the other is essentially a grave digger, if you can call it that. Someone who deals with the glorious gone after they are dead, the empty vessels. Now, not much is revealed about what exactly he's doing because those who don't do the work don't seem to know what exactly is going on there. But what's interesting, which probably stood out to you too, is this detail right at the beginning. Your blackened hands are a dead giveaway that your work is done below the towers. Who else prominently has blackened hands in the Dema story? Clancy. So this raises a whole bunch of questions. Is there any relation between the blackened hands that Tyler has and these people doing their work? Is there also a relation between Tyler having blackened hands but his neck isn't blackened, or vice versa? Obviously, we've long been under the understanding, for the most part, that the black color we see on Clancy is a result of him being smeared and under the control of the bishops. So they smear his neck, and then it travels down his arms to his hands, and and so forth. But there's also other indications that that's not quite the case, because we've seen his neck blackened and his hands, and we've seen that spreading from his hands and from his neck simultaneously, rather than it's starting at his neck and then going down to his hands. Especially during the Skilled and Icy era, we saw this. Is it just that when you're smeared and start decaying from that, like being smeared is a method of killing them, killing the citizens? And so after they're smeared, they slowly begin to die, and then when they're fully dead, they're covered in this. They're fully blackened, right, by this death. And so those who work with them also get that on their hands as a result. That could be as well. I'm not necessarily saying that because Clancy's hands are blackened, he must have been working with the dead or anything like that. But we also don't know what his job was in Dema. Let's look at the response. Pierre writes, "Dear Carta, if you only knew how long I spend washing my hands, you would know how embarrassed I am. They don't want anyone to know what we do down there. There were even laws written about what we inhale and how deeply our skin gets stained. You're right. It's an odd daily ritual down in the cellar, manipulating fire and elements to craft a monument for the latest glorious gone." Now, we kind of saw this, manipulating fire and elements, etc., in the music video for Nico and the Niners. That could very well be what we see them doing during that ceremony. And perhaps all the people in that ceremony are I'm just going to call them gravediggers, whatever Pierre's job specifically is called, disposing of the gone. I can tell you that after this many years down here, the glory has indeed faded. It is only sadness. There was a time when I believed it was truth, but that time passed, and only stains remain. I want to teach you what I know. Even more, I want to teach you how I believe we can break the cycle. This is significant because obviously this is someone who has a very intimate grasp on the workings of what is at the center of this vialism. This is an individual member of Dema. He isn't even a bandito at this point. He has an idea of how to break the cycle. This isn't coming from Tyler or the Torchbearer. This is coming from the Banditos themselves. And I feel like for that to happen and for that to make sense from a narrative standpoint, we would need to see a lot more of the individual banditos themselves. I don't know, maybe I'm just being nitpicky about that. I'm sure it could be done in a way in which we don't really learn that much more about different individuals. It's kind of just the banditos as a whole, as a unit, come up with an idea to break the cycle, and perhaps they are the ones who free Clancy as he's on trial or as he's in prison back in Dema or something like that. And we'll see that next after Paladin Strait. Perhaps. I'm not entirely sure. The other thing, though, is there's one final letter, and this was written from the Torchbearer to Clancy. You are what they said you were. I see the weathering on your face and the journey you've been on. Although we were away, I hope you now know that I never left you. It's time. They believe in the movement. They're ready to defeat this oppression, to end this archaic rule once and for all. We can meet out in trench at camp to lay out our plan. We'll bring everything you need, and so on. And this other detail here, we have support from yellow and red now. And my guess is that yellow and red represent those who are rebelling, but the yellow being the banditos and the red being those who are still, as I mentioned, in roles like soldiers or gravediggers who aren't necessarily fully banditos yet, but support this movement, would be my guess. So this letter coming at the end of the other letters, it was the last one in the list, and also, given what it says, makes me think that all of these letters were written before the Paladin Strait music video. And this kind of outlines how Clancy and the Torchbearer are going to meet in navigating, which further demonstrates something that I was saying last week, which is the idea that the music video for navigating doesn't fully make sense. Because Clancy gets to that bonfire and seems surprised that Josh is over there, or the Torchbearer is over there across the bonfire and not next to him anymore. And yet he has this letter which tells him that he's not with him. They're far away, they're separated, but he's with him still, but he isn't. So that reveal couldn't have really been a reveal for Clancy, unless he didn't understand that this Josh figure who's next to him that entire time was also the same thing as the Torchbearer. Maybe. I don't know. Basically, I have a lot of questions, and I don't think that these letters fully answered them, but I do think that there were a lot of interesting details among these letters. But what do you think? Have you looked through these letters, and is there anything which in particular stands out as important or significant from them, or answers a burning question which you had for some time before you looked at them? With that being said, thank you for watching, and be sure to let me know in the comments what you think. And don't forget to subscribe for more music commentary and reviews. See you next week.